off. I can start off with introducing myself. Myself and Crystal are from the Wellness and Health Action Team, or WHAT. You might have seen various things that we do around campus, but we are your peer health educators through the Health Promotion Department at SHAC. I use she or they pronouns. I am a community health promotion and clinical health sciences major. Sorry, there's, the working from home life. There's background noise always, but there's pets too. So hopefully you'll see a pet come through. And that is me. I'll pass it off to Crystal.
Hi everyone, my name is Crystal and I use she, her pronouns. And I am a community health promotion major and a philosophy minor. And this is one of my most favorite topics to talk about in the realms of like public health and health promotion, but also just in my personal life. So I'm really excited to be here with you all today. Thank you for honoring us with some of your time and attention. And I'm going to be kind of leading, facilitating, talking too much probably today. And so I've got some slides I'm going to share, and actually I will drop them in the chat. So if you would like to follow on your own screen, or if you just want to save them for later, there's a lot of links in there to different resources and things like that. And then Bella is going to be helping moderate the chat and also kind of answer any questions in there, drop in some links, things like that. We're very casual folks, so feel free to, if you're comfortable, just, unmute yourself and speak up if you have a question or comment. If you prefer to use the chat, that's awesome as well. So yeah, just whatever you're comfortable with.
And if you want to ask a question for the group and you're not comfortable putting that question in the main chat, you can send me a message directly and I can ask it to the group and no one will know that you asked the question. So you can send messages to me. And if there's a simple question, like where can I find this resource, I'll just answer it right there. And if it's something I think would be valuable to the group, then I will ask it to Crystal and we can start that conversation.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's get started. Okay, so we are going to just quickly go over a couple community guidelines. Alexandra already kind of went over some of these, but we're talking about bodies, and sometimes those topics can be a little bit uncomfortable. So I just want to reiterate that here are some things that to keep in mind. It's okay to feel embarrassed or uncomfortable. Please feel empowered to engage to your level of comfort and capacity today. So don't feel pressured to respond or engage in any particular way. Do what is best for you. And then also, we're here to hopefully learn a little bit. So kind of keeping an open mind during that process. Some things that we're definitely not going to talk about today, anything sort of kind of around eating disorders, any specifics around eating disorders, losing or gaining weight, and losing or gaining muscle. Those are not things we're going to be talking about. Okay, and if you need a break at any time, of course, feel free to step away. So some of our objectives are going to be just to kind of understand generally some of the systems that influence body image and self-esteem. And then also we're going to talk about negative self-talk because that can be a really big area for growth and change in improving your body image. We're also going to talk about cultural appropriation, appreciation, and assimilation, and sort of how those relate to body image as well. And then we're also going to have some different resources. A lot of them, like I said before, there will be links to those so that you can check them out at your leisure. But yeah, we're going to talk about a few different things around that. Okay, so to start out, we're just going to watch a quick little fun intro video about body positivity sort of as a social cultural movement. And I am going to have to actually share my audio. So going to reshare so that you can hear it. Okay.
Do you think there's a line where a body type becomes unhealthy?
Yeah, like if you're over 300.
What size do you think plus size would start at?
Doesn't it start at like a 14? I don't know.
I mean, if you're overweight, then it's obviously not healthy.
What would you say would be the opposite of plus size?
Like normal.
How would you define normal?
I have no idea.
On its most basic level, body positivity is the idea that all bodies are good bodies. When you think of what TV, magazines, and movies tell us a good body is, which celebrities come to mind?
We're asking people which celebrity they think has a really great body.
I think Jennifer Lawrence has my ideal body.
I definitely think Jennifer Aniston has a good body. She's toned. I don't know, she looks healthy.
Who would you choose?
Jessica Alba. She has like a healthy body type, in my opinion.
What can we deduce about good bodies based on these women? Good bodies are thin, straight, and most often white. There's nothing wrong with having a body like this, but the body positivity movement strives to create representation for marginalized bodies. We want to see fat bodies, queer bodies, bodies of color, and everything in between up front and center in mainstream media. You might have noticed that a common descriptor for these traditionally accepted body types is healthy. But can you really tell if someone is healthy by looking at them?
I mean, if you're overweight, then it's obviously not healthy because you're lugging a lot of excess weight around. And it's proven not to be healthy. People have died from overweight.
Just because someone is fat or just because someone is thin doesn't necessarily mean that that person is healthy or unhealthy. And even if someone is clinically unhealthy, that doesn't make them any less worthy of self-love.
You can't, like, by just looking at someone, you can't tell their genetic makeup. Like, you don't know their family background, their family history, and like, there's a lot of things that go into health rather than it just being like, are you a size 0 or a size 8?
Even though the body positive movement is for everyone, no matter what type of body you have, many plus-size body positive activists are asking the question, is it okay to call someone fat? Does the term plus size suggest that fat bodies aren't normal?
Do you think plus size has good connotations, bad connotations, or?
I feel like often it has bad connotations. Like people are always like saying bad things about people that are plus size.
I think it's usually considered negative.
What do you think is the opposite of the word plus size?
I guess negative size.
I mean, I guess just not plus sized.
Plus-size body positive activists, including yours truly, are reclaiming words like fat and plus size as descriptors and nothing more, just like someone might be tall or short. It's not an insult, it's a characteristic. Bottom line, the body positive movement wants everyone to feel worthy of self-love. Whether your body looks like that slender woman on the TV, like your favorite plus-size vlogger, or anything in between.
What type of bodies would you want to see more in the media?
Probably more plus size. I feel like there should be more because I feel like they're not appreciated enough.
I'm tall, so I like to see more tall people. It makes me feel better about myself.
I mean, just all kinds of bodies, really. I don't think we should like limit it to like any one particular like type.
It makes it harder to define what a perfect body is if there are so many out there.
I think everybody is beautiful, and I wish more people embraced that and understood that.
You deserve to feel beautiful, and you deserve to feel worthy. It's that simple.
Okay, so I just want to kind of add on to that video a little bit. The main commentator, specifically called out that we want to promote and have a lot of positivity around bodies that often don't get that, including fat bodies and people with bodies of color. But the video left out also people with disabilities. So this is also another really important group that we want to include in our sort of improvement of body image and what that looks like in society and our culture and things like that. So I just want to kind of name that to keep in your mind as well as we go through these things. Really, there is no limitations on what having a good body is. So kind of expanding that definition a little bit. Okay, so we're going to talk next about some things that can make up what we start to build in our head as our body image. Often we can think about this as sort of like a schema or a narrative or things that we have built in our minds to be truths about our bodies, about the bodies around us, about who we are in society because of them, all kinds of things. So beliefs about your appearance is one component of that. So, you know, how you perceive yourself when you look in the mirror, for example, is what that is kind of getting at. So beliefs about your appearance, it's almost like an opinion, you know. For example, you might really like a feature about yourself, or you might really dislike a feature about yourself. And that's based on your own personal perception, right? And it may or may not align with other people's perceptions. So the next thing is how you feel in your body. So beliefs about your appearance is a little bit more external, right? But how you feel is a very internal experience. So this might be things like, you know, what it feels like to move or breathe or be in different clothing or be in different physical environments, all those sorts of things. And I think it's important to name that these two components often don't align. And I think this is where a lot of discontent can happen within our own sort of mental schema of our body image, because the beliefs about our appearance are very highly influenced by societal standards. So they may be in one place, but then how we actually feel in our bodies might be in a completely different place. And I think that that's a really common experience. And that's why actually focusing a lot more on how you feel can be a positive kind of counteractive to negative beliefs you might hold about your appearance. And so the next thing is sort of your all-encompassing view of yourself. And I think that this is a big part of why sort of body positivity as a movement exists. You know, in the video, they said that everyone deserves to kind of feel good in their body. And that's regardless of, I appreciate that the video says, you know, even regardless of health status, like everyone deserves that. And so how you know, view yourself is really how that impacts your mental health and your perception of self and your satisfaction with life and things like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that influence these sort of key areas. And spoiler alert, the answer is it's everything. But we'll talk about some specifics. And this is a great time too, if you feel comfortable, you know, sharing any things that you have observed that influence your body image. Please feel free to speak up or drop anything in the chat. So parents, this is a huge one for me. One thing that we can often do when we are observing these narratives that we've built in our minds about things is we can ask ourselves, where is this voice coming from? Who is this voice? And for me, when I ask myself that question, the voice is almost always my mother. So, you know, who is saying these things can be a good question. So culture is a big one as well. And of course, I think it's important to talk about the wide variety of different, like there's differences in cultural beliefs about appearance, right? And so understanding how those things can interact for you, and especially if you're in a position where maybe your cultural identity is different from the dominant cultural narrative, you might experience some disconnect between what your beliefs are and what society is telling you about, you know, what you should look like, for example. So that's also important to be aware of. And of course, a largely dominant culture in terms of things, you know, like media and celebrities and advertising is
Yeah, exactly. Crystal, someone actually just said that in the chat about health influencers and the quote unquote wellness industry. And we actually talked about this on one of our podcast episodes that we'll talk about later. But yeah, the whole like we're trying to sell you something and that has to fit health into a very specific box. And those wellness influencers, you know, the diet teas on Instagram, like those can influence for sure. Not being able to find your size in stores, absolutely. The health and fitness industry, yeah.
Yeah. So that ties really in, you know, well into, of course, social media. I think the new sort of cultural phenomenon of influencers is really had a huge impact, and it's really interesting. It can be really positive, but it can also be harmful. Advertising, we mentioned, ability. So I think that this, again, there's a lot of narratives that we're told through society about what it means to have a disability, who qualifies as having a disability, what that means about what type of life you can have, and all kinds of things like that. Dysphoria and euphoria surrounding gender, someone said in the comment, absolutely, yes. Gender dysphoria is a huge part of the body image and what can influence that overall, for sure. Okay, so next we're going to kind of do a little exercise in how you can start to address some of these beliefs that you might hold. So I like to look at it as, you know, sort of a couple of steps. First of all is identifying what limiting beliefs might be, and then also kind of identifying where they've come from. So we sort of have done those two steps. And then the next thing is, once we've identified them, you know, how can we address them? So one way to do that is through what we call the circles of influence. And essentially it's just understanding what your level of control is and kind of where you have the capacity to do that. So things that you can control, you know, examples, social media and friends. So, you know, tailoring your social media feed to be something that is supportive of, you know, I would say general body positivity is great, but specifically, you know, having people that look like you, having people who look like you and who are empowering, you know, that community and things like that. And I'm a huge fan of, like, if it's not like serving you, just get rid of it, especially with social media. And then also friends, right? So if you are in any sort of relationship that is having some negative dynamics go on, especially if it's starting to get into that, you know, potentially like abusive phase, I think that there can be a lot of verbal abuse around body image and relationships. So that's an area where having, you know, boundaries and maybe having to reduce or remove relationships, things like that, can be important. Especially with friends, like if they're putting you down, like, bye. So I think then things that you can influence, which means that you have some ability to possibly change situations a little bit, or maybe change perceptions. So we call that influence instead of control, right? It's not something that you can 100% manage with just what you need or want. And this is particularly true when things are involving other people. Like, you know, we can't control other people. So and a couple examples would be like parents. Again, you know, I think that it can be really challenging with loved ones when you have a loving relationship, but there's maybe this one piece where I'll give an example. So like if you have a loved one who is really deeply entrenched in diet culture, and they're, you know, always wanting to like talk about their diet and talk about their weight and talk about things like that, that might be triggering for you or might not support you having a positive, healthy body image. that can be really difficult space to navigate because, you know, if it's a loved one, you probably want a relationship with them, but there's this one thing. So that's where it's kind of this gray area. So with the influence, you know, it's easy to talk about having some sort of positive change. So with it's kind of redefining your perceptions or reassessing things, or, you know, possibly having a conversation with someone to try to improve the situation, things like that. And similar with disability. So, you know, having a disability, it can come and go. They're not fixed like other identities can be. However, once you're in a place of experiencing a disability, that's kind of, that's how it is. There's not really a getting rid of it or changing it or anything like that. So, but what you can change or control or work on is, again, environment, perceptions, things like that. And then, it got too excited. There we go. So, being able to let go of things in terms of that is particularly advertising or any sort of like mass media stuff, right? We can choose not to be impacted by that, or try to choose not to be impacted by that, and to sort of set boundaries, limitations, remove that part of our lives a little bit, and things like that. Okay. So next we're going to talk a little bit about sort of narrowing things down, right? We've talked about what these things are, kind of how they come about, where they come from. Now we're going to talk about some of the influences that create these social narratives and systems that impact our body image. And so laws, policies, this is a big one. I don't know how many folks know about things like the ugly laws. We're going to talk a little bit more about some specific things, but there historically have been many laws and policies that target people, people of color, people with disabilities, people who do not fit, like in terms of the ugly laws. I mean, it literally was regulations about how people looked. And so there's a huge history of, you know, specific targeted forms of discrimination against people based on the bodies that they inhabit. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that, because even if a lot of these laws or policies have changed, and of course we still have a lot of laws that support discriminatory systems, but even if they have changed, we still are left with that cultural narrative that plays into that, right? So, and that's why we see our media and things have these, you know, very white, thin, cis, hetero, etc., able-bodied representations, because those are the representations of what the laws and policies have upheld for many decades in our country. And so that's really what influences culture. And so I think that that's important to acknowledge, especially if you're in a position where you're wanting to advocate for change in this area. I wish I wish that laws and policies didn't have to be a part of that, but unfortunately it does make a big influence on culture. And because as you can see in this diagram, there's sort of arrows between each of these concepts: laws, policies, culture, and media. And so moving between the three, they're all cyclical, right? They affect each other. Our culture affects our laws and policies. That is huge, because really what that means is that things that we're choosing to put into law are a reflection of the values that our culture holds. And so, you know, if we have discriminatory laws, like that says something about culture that needs to be changed. So I think this is a helpful way to kind of think about the different ways that you can influence larger scale systems, if that's something that you feel passionate about. So like I mentioned, there's a lot of historical legislation around bodies and who can be in different places, who can have different rights and services, all kinds of things like that. So here is, I'm sure, a partial list of some of these things. I think that you can, just by glancing at it, you can see that a lot of these laws are racist, and a lot of them are also anti-LGBTQ and things like that. And I think it's also important to acknowledge how some of these things are still going on. And again, it might not be a law, but it is a practice. It's a cultural practice that these things are still enforced. And so keeping a lot of this in mind, I think when on a personal level, having that knowledge that maybe negative values that you hold about yourself have been sort of passed to you by these unjust systems of discrimination it's just a little bit helpful to keep that in mind, and to remember that that's wrong. Like, this cultural value is wrong, and so I think that can help to take a little pressure off of yourself in some ways. So we've been talking a little bit about culture. It's influenced by laws and policies, like I said. And it's also, like I mentioned before, it varies by environment. So I think that's really helpful when it comes to body image. I think even, within like the Portland area, for example, you could move between different sort of cultural communities, and you could start to see and understand different perceptions of body image. And I think that in some ways, this is a really great opportunity to learn from different cultures or different cultural groups. Particularly Black women have been the force and push and guide of the body positive movement, at least for the last several decades I'm aware of. I'm sure for long before that as well. So there's a lot to learn from how different cultures, different from our own, treat and interact with body image. And social media. So we'll just kind of switch gears a little bit. And if anyone wants to share any of their sort of reflections on some of these questions, feel free to drop it in the chat or speak up. I'll talk a little bit about my experience with social media and body image. So as a background, I used to work in the health and fitness industry for a long time. And my life and my social media was heavily filled with a lot of diet culture and a lot of people who were the quote, cultural standard of beauty and things like that. And my mental health was in the toilet. And so since then, I've done a lot of personal work on that. And one thing that has made actually a big difference is that my social media feed now is really filled with a lot of people who are not only like leading in body positivity, but they also are representative of a lot of different types of bodies. And it's really made a big difference on my perception of these things. So in the chat, we've got making Instagram exclusively body positive and feminist views. I don't have many friends and no political sites, so it's a happy, positive place. I love that idea. I think that using social media like less as a social connection tool and more as sort of a safe space for yourself is such a great idea. I use social media online to help support my for a business. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too, is like sometimes you need to be on social media for your business or for school or, whatever it is, or even to engage with people, especially in this virtual time and during COVID. And then sometimes if you're able to step away from it completely, like Crystal and I have kind of taken different approaches. She's really like dived deep and like curated her feed to be healthy for her. I was like just done. And so I just completely deleted Instagram. And that was the best way for me to just get a fresh, clean slate. But for some people, that's not possible. So I think find what's right for you. And we have a lot of judgment and shame around social media use or, how often you're on your phone and that sort of thing. But some people really need it and some people really don't. So figure out what's right for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't be afraid of that block button. Yes, I like that. And doing a purge. Yeah, I think that's good too, every once in a while, to just like ask yourself these questions, reevaluate, and maybe make some changes if you need to. The lowest point of my mental health because at the time I was using social media the most. Yep. Yeah, and caring about it. I think that's a really important point to highlight as well. Like, there's one thing to kind of use social media and be like, oh yeah, this, you know, this is what's going on, cool, whatever, and not really attaching to it. But especially if you're noticing yourself really caring or really feeling, whether it's like left out or like, you know, jealousy, or, oh, I should be doing that, I should look like that, those kinds of things. Those are some kind of good red flags to be observant of. Before and after pictures, this is a great topic to talk about. Yeah, it affected the way I saw my own body. Absolutely. So there's a, and before being unacceptable. Yeah. So there's kind of the opposite of that. There's a lot of kind of campaign on social media where people in larger bodies will take pictures of themselves and be like, I'm not your before picture. Because it's huge, right? To say, because people, when they do these before and after pictures, they're kind of saying like, this is wrong and this is right. And it's, yeah, that's yuck.
And even in like diet pill ads or something like that, often they actually use completely different people for the before and after, just like proving that it's complete BS. It doesn't actually work, the product that they're trying to sell you. And just like to keep that in mind, and also that there's a lot of privilege involved in like the ways that people are able to like curate those feeds, and you're seeing everything through a filter and through a bottle of like, you're not seeing all of the other things that they have going on that allow them to do that, like the money and privilege and access to food and, you know, daycare and like whatever else it is. Like, there's so many things that go behind the scenes that you don't get to see when we just see that little tip of the iceberg with social media.
Yeah. And then there's also a comment about exposure to more representation. I think that that's a really great tool as well. You know, especially right now while we're kind of in quarantine and having to have social spacing and things like that. There's not a lot of opportunity for us to kind of connect with people who might be different from us. But social media can be a good way to hear other stories and kind of connect and things like that. So I love that idea. That's great. Okay, so and next we're gonna do just kind of talk about some self-reflection questions. Again, this could be kind of triggering. It's a very personal sort of exploration. So feel free to engage however you feel comfortable. But so these are examples of some things that you might ask yourself, or some things you could reflect upon to sort of assess where you might stand with your relationship to your body or your body image. I think that in a lot of ways, you know, personally for me growing up, no one ever stopped and said, how do you feel about your body? You know, like we don't really, we're not prompted to pause and think about these things in everyday life. However, they certainly still exist, right? Those narratives are still in our minds. And so having just a moment to pause and ask yourself, you know, how do you feel? What do you think about when you think about your body? Does it leave you in a good or bad mood? These are just some signals that you might be able to notice that might be clues as to some areas that you might want to make some changes or things like that. So I think one of the most important questions on here is, what causes you to have good or bad self-esteem? So if, you know, you're after, you know, scrolling through social media for 30 minutes, you are kind of having poor, low self-esteem, right? That's a signal. If when you like get, you know, dressed up in an outfit you really like and stuff like that, and you feel really good, you know, that's a signal. So things like that can help you know what you might want to put some more boundaries or limitations on, and what you might want to foster more in your life to help support that positive self-image. And then the other one that I really like is, what are messages you tell yourself every day? We're going to talk a little bit more about that. And we've kind of, you know, in terms of thinking about where some of these narratives come from and things like that. But that's another favorite question of mine. Okay, so what are some ways we can identify and disrupt fat phobia in our everyday conversations? Feel free again to pop anything in the chat or unmute yourself. I think one thing that is a small thing that we can do is, if you observe someone, you know, saying, oh, well, this person has this type of body, so that means XYZ. You know, you can just quickly say something like, oh, well, just because a certain person looks a certain way, you know, doesn't mean that this is true, or we don't really know, things like that. This particularly can apply to people in larger bodies and health status, like was discussed in the video, right? I think it's really common for people to say things like, oh, well, that person is really, really big, so they probably have diabetes. I mean, things like this, right? So being able to say, hey, actually, we don't know anything about this person's health status, and it's not our business, can be helpful. And in terms of social situations, also disrupting our own fat phobia in our minds, which is particularly challenging because it's, you know, noticing it and then sort of kind of rewiring our thoughts. But kind of the questions on the previous slide, like, why do I feel this way? What is this narrative telling me? Like, where did this come from? Those sorts of questions. We can also use those to perceive how we think about other people.
Yeah, I think a good way to start with this too is literally just noticing it and seeing it for what it is, because fat phobia is so pervasive that it's in our everyday lives, and we see it as normal a lot of the times because it's just part of everyday conversation. Like, I'm just thinking of an example of like fat shaming our pets. Like, why do we do that? And it's a reflection of how we see fat bodies in humans too. So it's not just like, oh, it's just about pets, but you know, like there's so many things that we say, even like using big or fat as like a negative adjective in our speech patterns. Like those little things, I think, is if we start to notice them, we can start to undo them.
Yeah. And I think that this is also a really good question to ask in regards of ableism. Because that's another area that is so pervasive in our culture, and it's so inground. It's so deeply woven into all kinds of things, that noticing where are these areas where we see ableism coming up, where we're expecting it just to kind of quickly define ableism is to some extent expecting that everyone has the same ability, right? And just presuming this is what people can do, so this is how we're gonna do the thing, and that's not the case.
Jennifer, you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Oh, great, thanks. I didn't want to interrupt. I didn't have a question. I had a comment. Being in COVID, there's just way too much Netflix time, and I tried to engage with shows that I formerly loved, and one of them was 30 Rock. And I think Tina Fey is really brilliant and a strong woman, and presents herself in a positive way and sees herself. Anyway, I stopped after like the second episode because she just kept getting fat shamed over and over. Do you think you need that pizza? Or just random comments made by the man. And what blew my mind, what really saddened me, was that she's the writer, she's the creator and writer of the show, and she just built all of this ugliness into it. So I find myself, as I move through kind of women's studies and exploring my own feminism and body positivity, that I have to let go of things that I used to love because they don't serve me, and no one needs to. You don't tell yourself those things, for goodness sakes. But yeah, it's just, I don't want to engage in it. I just don't engage in it anymore. It's not okay. So yeah.
Yeah, that's
you.
great. Thank you for sharing that, Jennifer. And people are saying in the chat also about praising weight loss, or how we compliment people. And that brings to mind an interesting thing from my past, is a time when I was really unhealthy. I was barely eating because I was really sick and having a lot of digestive and stress and mental health issues. And I lost a bunch of weight because I was like barely clinging on to life. And people were like, oh my gosh, you look great. And I was suffering so much. So like, really, it is body size is not an indicator of health. And if someone loses a bunch of weight, that could be a sign of something negative going on. Like, that is not necessarily a positive thing. And that's just a reflection of fat phobia.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to kind of highlight what Jennifer said as well, in that Tina Fey wrote those jokes, like you said. So oftentimes even people who experience like the discrimination or marginalization from these power systems still can uphold these harmful narratives, right? So I mean, like, there are a lot of people in larger bodies who are going to sing, diet culture praises, and so it's definitely can be upheld that way. Yeah. Oh, rewatching Friends is painful for a lot of reasons. Yeah. Oh, commenting on children's bodies. Yes, that's a good point. That can definitely be teaching kids about these things is really helpful. Yeah. Okay, that's a good talk. I think just for time, I'm gonna. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just a very quick question. So I work with children, and I notice around like food and all of that. I have a hard time figuring out like should I encourage this kid to eat? Like I don't know. Like, do you have any like insight or I guess like advice for like working with kids and talking about food with them, or just like their bodies in general? I mean, I never comment on like a child's weight or anything like that. I don't believe in that. But like the conversation around food with a kid, you know what I mean? Like, how do you instill this like I guess a very healthy view of like how we eat, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it starts with nutrition education, and kids can learn about nutrition as young as like preschool. We can start teaching them like what are things that make us feel good, and I think it's focusing on what makes the bodies feel good instead of looking good, and that's just one way to start. And also understanding the context behind a child. There's so much that goes into why they eat the way they do or why they look the way they do. We have no idea what's going on in their home life sometimes, their access to food, their parents' relationship with food and how that affects them. There's so many contextual factors that I don't even think like a teacher or educator can really intervene in that way without knowing the context really well.
Yeah, and Eniko, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so I actually studied early childhood education and I worked in child care in an education setting for a long time. And I think that one topic that was often brought up was, like picky eaters or children who are very selective with the food they eat. And there's also children who eat different amounts than other children. And I think that the biggest thing when we talk about food in our bodies is never to use shaming language or like force them to do something that they don't want to do unless that child is in danger or the parent has like a genuine concern. And I'm just talking about like educational setting, but like this can branch out into other parts of life where you work with children, because oftentimes it comes down to like the philosophy of the center you work with. And so, but like on a personal level where I'm coming from, it's like, don't use shaming language, don't alienate children for the food they eat. Some kids might bring food from home. That's quite normal, and it might be different than what other children are eating. And you just have to like like Bella said, like have like a discussion about what feels good, where the food comes from. And it's like, I think that every moment is like a good, positive, teachable moment. And just like avoid like shaming like that child or making them feel bad or forcing them to do something that they're not yet ready to do, like try a new food. Just like introduce them to like these subjects, and then I don't know, children are a whole lot more capable and a lot smarter than we give them credit for. So yeah.
Thank you.
I mentioned in the chat, there is a resource called Kids Eat in Color, and it is essentially intuitive eating, which is what Emma mentioned, kind of for kids from sort of that parental or caregiving perspective. And intuitive eating is, just as a quick info, is sort of that is really the natural state of humans eating, right? Where we eat when we're hungry, we eat things that are, you know, kind of sound good or appealing, that feel like they're nourishing to us, and kind of understanding our fullness cues and things like that. So that's, I think that intuitive eating and body positivity kind of really go hand in hand. Our bodies will tell us what makes us feel good. Yeah, absolutely. So we don't have a ton of time left, and y'all are having a great conversation. So I think I'm going to kind of breeze through some of this stuff, and we can just kind of focus on some resources and kind of keep the conversation going. Making food fun. Yes, this is a great tip for kids as well. Involving them in cooking, planning meals. Schools that have gardens, that has shown to be a huge improvement for kids. Montessori schools are big on teaching independence and children making their own food, yep, and choosing when they can eat and when they're hungry. I know there's also a concept, it's called the division of responsibility or something like that, and it's that the caregiver can decide sort of when to eat and what to eat, and the child decides if they want to eat and how much they want to eat. So that can be a way to look at it as well. And I'm just going to click through some of these things. Okay, so I'm going to quickly talk about some different like tools and resources. So affirmations is, I think, a particularly powerful tool for improving body image. So there's a lot of different ways you can do this. One thing that you can do is when you start to identify those negative beliefs that we've talked about is then respond to those with an affirmation. So if you start to hear, if you're me and you start to hear your mother say, you shouldn't be eating that, you know, you can respond with, I deserve to feed my body however feels good to me, like things like that, and kind of just in your own mind countering some of those. Another thing that I like to do with these is like if you're in like the shower or you're putting on lotion or just anything where you're sort of like in contact with your own body, to just say even just a simple like I love my body, like while you do those things, can be really, really loving and powerful. So I'll kind of skip over this. Okay, so acknowledging that your appearance of your body and your health are different and they're separated and they do not need to influence each other is important. And then also that your value is separated from your body shape, size, abilities, anything like that. And then surrounding yourself with people who make you feel good about yourself. I know that can be really challenging, but I think even if you can have, you know, like moments like this where we're kind of in this group where we all have this value, right? That can be really healing. I love the idea of drawing and publishing representations of yourself or of just different bodies in general. Don't feel pressured on the publishing part, but you know, creating art that is celebrating bodies. Will we discuss a bit on body neutrality? I don't have that on here, but if you would like to mention it or ask a question or anything like that, go for it.
Yeah, so like there's this concept of like body neutrality where, sometimes like it's hard to really like go from body negativity to body positivity. So it's like kind of bridging the gap in between those is a concept called body neutrality, where you're just like, I have a body, I'm alive, and it doesn't really have a positive or negative thing. And for me personally, that really helped me kind of taking those steps towards it, because it was really hard kind of like reworking the neurons in my brain and like challenging that negative self-talk. So sometimes you just wake up and you're just like, I have a body and I exist and I'm alive, and just like telling yourself that and just kind of like growing to accepting yourself just as like a human being, and then taking those steps to body positivity if that's something that you wanted to go towards. Personally speaking, it's just really helped me accept my body for what it is.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I think in general, neutrality is an excellent stance for a lot of these things, because right there, when we start to divide things into good or bad, that comes with a ton of baggage, right? Whether it's body image or nutrition is a great way to apply this as well. And so, yeah, keeping that neutral space. This isn't good or bad, it just exists, is really helpful. So thanks for sharing that. Oh, by calling their body their meat suit that you can. I like skin sack personally. Maybe that's too much information, but yeah, meat suit, skin sack, bag of bones, whatever. Okay, so I'm going to jump. Okay, so we kind of ran out of time to talk about appropriation, but I do want to take a minute to talk about it because I think it's super important. So I think a way that appropriation can really be associated with body image is that we have our sort of dominant culture, and then we have the narratives that are built into that about what someone should look like, right? And what has happened over time is that dominant culture, particularly white culture, has then taken things from other cultures and used them to sort of promote and benefit white culture without having the credit, or oftentimes even like the financial benefit or things like that from the cultures they come from, right? And so I think this is important to talk about with body image, because evaluating sort of where things that make us feel good come from is important to understand. And I think also evaluating where there might be different like aversions to sort of cultural stereotypes and things like that around image and how we present and all that. So I just, to keep it brief, I encourage you to kind of maybe ask yourself and assess like some of the things that make me feel good, like, particularly around clothing or hairstyles or aesthetic overall or things like that. Where did these things come from? And do I understand where they're coming from? And some of those questions, just to kind of know where your influence is, because what often happens is that particularly white people, end up taking from other cultures and then sort of making something cool. And so we see this a lot with, if you've heard of blackfishing. So this is like common with pop stars, right? They, like a white pop star will sort of emanate Black culture in some ways, but then because they're still white, it's deemed cool. So things like that, I think it's just important to kind of be aware of for yourself. So we're going to, there's a lot of things on this slide. We're going to talk about some resources that are available at PSU. So of course, counseling services at SHAC is an option, especially if you would like to. There's two options. You can either, like if you're having a day where you're really struggling with, you know, sort of body image or the experience of being in your body or things like that, and you just need someone to talk to sort of quickly, counseling services is available. Or if this is something that you would like some long-term support on to really kind of learn and dig into more in terms of your personal experiences and things like that, you can do that as well. And then also, of course, you probably all have heard of a lot of our different resource centers, cultural resource centers. There's a variety of different sort of related supports that they offer around sort of self-image and things like that. And it can also be a great place to find some community. And then for the Wellness and Health Action Team, we have some specific resources that we put out. One of them is our podcast. Bella is one of our leads on the podcast, and it is amazing. The team does a really, really great job. And there's a new episode each week of the term, and they're on a variety of health topics. But we do have several specifically that are on things kind of around body image. Bella and I just did one recently about sort of nutrition and diet culture and some of those things. So you can look through and see which ones you're interested in. We also have a blog called Campus Well, and again, we release articles weekly, and there's a huge variety of content on there on a variety of health topics. So pretty much anything you're interested in, you could find on there. And we have done a few different things on body image, and I'm really excited. Next term, we're going to be doing an article on sort of like self-confidence, body confidence, and how that relates to sex. And then we have our virtual mind spa. So this is just sort of a general resource for kind of mental health and well-being that is sort of a virtual space for you to de-stress. So there's like meditation videos and stretching videos and journal prompts and coloring pages and just a variety of things that can kind of help with stress management. We also have an Instagram account. If you would like to follow us, curate your feed to not have garbage on there, then we, again, variety of different things, including body positivity that we post about. So that's all I have, and we are kind of right at time. Does anyone have any other questions or thoughts?